Today is October 19th, 2017. I'm Barry Wolf with the Strathroy Caradoclions. I'm sitting in here in the kitchen of Clive Morant, and his service number was 1279554. Thank you, Clive, for allowing me to ask you some questions and sharing your experiences with me.
I hope you find it interesting.
Oh yeah. When and where were you born, Clive?
Portsmouth, February the 3rd, 1923.
And you were raised in Portsmouth?
I was raised in Portsmouth by foster parents.
And how long did you go to school?
I remember my first infant school, 5 to 14.
And you left school to go to work?
Work for a coal merchant. My job was to deliver coal and chop up sticks which were used to light fires in them days.
And how long did you do that? Until you were?
14 and a half, then I went to work for a newsagent and deliver papers in the normal way, and also do work in the shop, general activities for a newsagent.
And you did that until you...
And I did that, I did that until I was, say, about 6 months, maybe a year, and I always wanted to be an electrician. So eventually I got a job as a projectionist in the local cinema. And I worked with them also for 3 or 4 months, then progressed into, I finally worked I took an apprenticeship in the Royal Naval Dockyard. I worked in the dockyard during the early days of 1940. And from there, I was injured in an air raid and ended up in hospital. When I was discharged from the hospital, I joined the Royal Air Force in 1941.
And you were, like, 20 years old, something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, young man. And so you took your basic training?
I took my basic training in Bournemouth, England, and I also took 2 courses of I wanted to continue my electrical training, so I took 2 electrical courses and passed a first-class electrician and was eventually discharged, eventually posted to Evanton, Scotland, on aircraft training, Air Force, aerodrome.
So what were you supposed to do? You were
to maintain aircraft.
So at this point, were you placed in a service unit at this time?
No, when I was, after I finished my electrical training, I was, as I say, posted to Scotland. And my job there was to service, in those days, there were different aircraft. Bombers, there's a few bombers aircraft there called a BOFA, a B-O-F-I-A-R, very old aircraft, and various fighter aircraft.
Was this when you were in the 3207 service unit?
No, this was as an electrician in the Royal Air Force. I got, to explain that, after a time, I got bored with that job in Scotland, and there was a chance to volunteer. They was asking for volunteers for special services, and I took advantage of that. And I was sent to London for medical intelligence, and eventually decided they passed me, and I was sent back to Inverary, Scotland, to for commando training.
And what did you have? What were the jobs of the commandos?
The jobs of the commandos was to carry out your normal activity. In my case, as an electrician, they were made up of. There's every trade in our unit. We were formed into a unit called 3207 Servicing Commando. It was a command. It was made up of 150 men of all different trades and all different armaments. We had Bren guns. I had a BOFA rifle, I think it was called in them days. It's not used now. And our job was to service Royal Air Force, any aircraft in Royal Air Force Fighter Command.
So in this service unit, there were a variety of technicians, you said.
Yeah.
And so there were people who would do engine repairs?
Yes, that was our general job, yes.
And some would do airframe repairs on wings and things?
Yeah, you'd have airframes, you'd have fitters, you'd have armourers, and you'd have electricians.
And you were in charge of?
The electricians.
Yeah. So part of this training, as you said, was to have some practical experience going out to various...
Yes, we didn't know at the time what was going on at that time. We
So
knew in the future there might be some activity, but the invasion wasn't mentioned in them days, not in the early days.
So what type of aircraft were you being trained on?
Spitfires, Mustangs, Typhoon, rocket-firing Typhoons, Hurricanes, pretty well any aircraft that the Allies used as fighters, not bombers, as fighters.
So you're a fighter aircraft crew. So you would go off to different airfields to experience these different aircraft.
Combined with the activities of the excuse me, combined with the activities of training as a commando, and all the things that involves, we also would go from different airfields to train on the aircraft of that particular airfield. So it consisted over the following months to travel through England on different airfields and always arrive back at our rest centre was Air Force Station Western Zoyland.
Something significant happened to you there. What was that major event?
The most significant and most important thing that ever happened to me in World War II was that I met my wife, and I honestly mean that, because I had 70, and it resulted in 70 years of marriage. So it was a good decision.
Absolutely. Congratulations on your experiences at Western Zoyland. And then you were at other air bases, I understand. You were at Zeals.
Zeals, Bournemouth, Zeals, Herne, Western Zoyland, Evanton.
And the 3207.
East Church, Sheppey Island, numerous, there's so many I can't even remember them all. But it was always on the move. The idea was to make sure that we were being trained for mobility, to pack up and move quickly.
So the 3207 Fighter Command was preparing itself for an invasion, and it turned out that that invasion was eventually
Normandy.
Yeah. So your job was to support the Canadian and British armies?
Right.
And what did they do? I understand something about you advanced as they advanced. How did that work?
No, what would advance? They would, as soon as the army occupied an area suitable for making a landing strip, that was the first object of the activity. One of the jobs of the army. And once that airstrip was allocated, the engineers of the Army Pioneer Corps would grade that area. It may have been a farm in France, or every area somebody decided to use. And the first one, as I understand it, was B2, Coulombs, outside the village of Coulombs, spelled, I think it was C-O-L-U-M-B. And it was designated as B2.
So they've now graded the airfield.
Right.
But there's nothing there except this graded airfield. That's when you came into the picture.
We move in.
What do you do?
The 3207 in the object of the exercise, the 3207 Service Commandos in this particular case would move into that airfield and prepare it for visiting aircraft, or whoever wanted to use it, either as an emergency landing field and eventually as a fighter base to assist the army.
So when you first got started in the war, the aircraft would start in England
Right.
and then fly across the channel
Do a
as
sortie
far as they could
and
go.
fly back. And
And
the
as
idea was to immediately assist the army or the problem involved, and also to cut down flying time.
so as the army was able to advance, you would build an airfield in France. You would move in, set up a new airfield, so they would fly back from their sorties to France instead of going all the way back to England.
Correct.
So you're hoping to advance as the army
Yeah,
advances.
it's an economic move and a practical move, of course.
Cuts down time and things. And so you've got this airfield and you set up your ground sheets and your armaments and things. What kinds of things did you have to do there to the aircraft?
Well, maintain the aircraft in the normal sense. The fitters looked after the engines, we looked after the electrical system, and the armaments looked after the armament. We would assemble rockets, because it was the Typhoon is a rocket carrying aircraft. There are various aircraft carried rockets. So one of the jobs of everybody, not only the armors, was to assemble the rockets. They were assembled on site.
Mm-hmm. You started in B2 in France.
Right.
And then this is still with the 3207.
Okay, me personally, I was attached originally on the invasion to advance to Normandy in the normal sense. Through circumstances, I ended up back in England because the LCT was torpedoed.
So on the invasion date was set for June the 6th.
That would be the 6th of June.
They were supposed to invade and you were supposed to go with them.
Which I didn't, because through circumstances I explained, I was dispatched back to England and to Portsmouth. The rest of my unit, 3207, did advance and were the first occupiers to use B2 as an air force. I didn't join them till later on when I was discharged, or whatever the word was, at Portsmouth, and I ended up posted to RAF Herne, which was a Typhoon Squadron, 182. I was then informed that that would be my unit, and I eventually flew to the invasion, flew to B2 from RAF Herne. So the ironic situation was I'd been trained for 18 months as a commando to advance in the normal sense that we all know of landing on the beaches. Instead of that, I actually flew with a new group, namely 182 Squadron, and I became the NCO of electricians. Well, I had a sergeant in charge of me, of course, and I operated as electrician and made up the group there of 182. I did have the opportunity, my CO knew that I had been associated with 302, Servicing Commando, and I had the opportunity to visit them on the beach when they were discharged and stood down, because we are now taking over the airfield, and they flew back to England, or whatever way I think they did. I'm not sure how they dispatched back to England, and eventually they ended up in Burma at the surrender of Rangoon. I stayed with 182 in France and advanced through France, Holland, Belgium, Germany, and spent the rest of the war until 1946 in Europe.
So I'm just clarifying here. We go back to June the 6th. You're with your 3207 commandos, your 150 plus men, you're in your 4 groups, you're all in your landing craft, all ready to sail away, and 3207 went except for a few of you because you got torpedoed and were unable to go. So you your war started on June 6th in England.
And ended.
Well, and that part ended because we were still in Portsmouth.
Yeah,
So the rest of them that didn't get torpedoed, they're now over in Normandy setting up their base with the 3207s.
Correct.
So you're no longer 3207 because
No.
you got into the 182s.
Right. They had problems. They wanted an NCO experience on typhoons, and of course I was posted to them in the emergency or whatever.
So you caught up to them.
And I caught up to them because we landed. 182 actually took over B2, which was the first Air Force that 3207 had occupied.
So when 3207 is finished with setting up the B2 air base, you're not with them, you're with the 182s. They're leaving,
Yeah.
and you got to stay because
Correct.
your old buddies you're no longer with your buddies.
Didn't see them again for the rest.
Except when you said goodbye on the beach.
Not to this day did I ever see any one of them.
Yeah.
Oh yes, I beg your pardon. Later on I did pick up with a couple of them.
So now you've moved from France to Belgium. I understand you were in Brussels.
Yeah, I live. 182 Squadron was the first Air Force squadron to enter Brussels the 3rd of September, the liberation of the town, the city.
And then Eindhoven in Holland.
Now there, and later on, as the army advanced, we followed them up, and the next we all went to a couple of stops beforehand, but eventually we settled in Eindhoven, and we were there over the period of 44 to 45.
And then you eventually went to Germany.
And eventually we progressed through Germany in various stations. Wunsdorf comes to mind, Hanover, and eventually we moved off to the Lübeck coast, the Baltic coast, and ended up meeting the Russians at Lübeck.
Just outside Berlin.
And that was on May the 8th. And we celebrated in two places really, the end of the war. We were moved quickly to Copenhagen, which was also liberated during the 7th, 8th and 9th, during that period of time. And we were moved swiftly to Copenhagen. And
then you weren't disbanded or demobbed along with your buddies.
And at the end of the war, 182 Squadron was disbanded within a very short period of time, probably within the first month. And they were dispatched back to England, again without me. I am now being attached to another squadron in Schleswig-Holstein called 30 Group.
And what were your jobs? What was
My
your duty
jobs there were very mundane. The war is now over, and all known air squadron, Royal Air Force squadron in northern Germany, were ordered to dispatch their equipment to this camp that I was stationed at. My job was to record and unload the vehicles and the material that the squadrons were leaving behind, because they weren't taking anything back to England. And that I did that squadron after squadron over a period of nearly a year.
And when did you head back to Portsmouth?
I didn't come back to Portsmouth till September 1946.
And who was waiting for you?
My young wife, who had I'd been away from her for 2 years since I got married, but there were occasionals that I can relate later on that I did see her during that 2-year period. But by and large, she didn't see me for 2 years. I did smuggle myself onto a Lancaster aircraft from, I think I was in Eindhoven at the time, Holland at the time. That was quite an experience. I did something which was very stupid. Cut a long story short, I got aboard this Lancaster which was being dispatched back to England for maintenance. A friend of mine, a pilot of 182, was a Canadian. I asked him when I knew that he was due to accompany this Lancaster to England. His job was to bring back a private aircraft that the squadron needed for local transportation for whatever reason. And I asked him any chance of a trip. And he said to me, "Corporal, you know I can't give you any answer, but you know where the door is." I ended up in England. I forget the camp. The camp was called Warmwell. I landed in Warmwell, RAF Warmwell, and his instructions for me: you be here by 5 o'clock tomorrow morning, otherwise you're on your own. Don't let me down. Off I went. My focus was to get to my wife, who I knew was stationed at RAF Netheravon, which was north of Salisbury. And to prove how lucky you can be, I went to the local bus station in Warmwell and found out that they were running a bus to Salisbury to pick up the troops for. They were going to Netheravon to pick up the troops to take them into Salisbury for the night, which was quite a regular thing for the local bus stations in them days. I asked the bus driver any chance for a lift, knowing of course I had no money. I'm in a very untidy position, clothing, and he looked at me queer. I gave him the story of why I wanted to see my wife. He took pity on me and told me to get on the bus. The bus proceeded to Netheravon, and as it ran round towards the gate, there was the line of troops waiting for their trip into Salisbury. My wife was among the troop waiting to get on that same bus. She saw me. It was a double-decker bus. She saw me hanging on the back of this bus and she went berserk. I think that's the only word you can use there. Eventually everybody calmed down. She got on the bus and I stayed on the bus with her into Salisbury, and my wife and I spent the whole night on a seat in the bus station in Salisbury. There was no lucky restaurant or nothing. We just stayed there and talked, and she cried. All sorts of things that happen to young lovers, because that's what we were after all. The laugh was, at 11 o'clock that night, she can now return on that bus back to Netheravon. Me, I've got to get myself back to Warmwell. There was no way in hell was there a bus service from Salisbury to Warmwell at 11 o'clock that night, which I hadn't even thought or worried about. But I did proceed, and I had to get there by 5 AM, which was quite a task, which was solved by a hay cart lift. The American, I had a short run with an American in a Jeep, and the rest was on foot. I got there by 3 o'clock in the morning. It took me 4 hours to get that 20-odd miles or whatever the distance is from Warmwell to Salisbury. I've never worked that one out. And I did get back to the camp. The guard on the camp outside Warmwell challenged me, obviously. Couldn't figure out who the hell I was or what I was doing. I ended up in the guard room. Everybody is corresponding with somebody, and I said, well, I can't waste time. I've got to be on an aircraft which is due back to Germany tomorrow morning. While they were arguing and discussing, I made one wild dash out of the guard room to the hangar, and there was the Canadian pilot waiting very nicely near this, I think it was a Dominic aircraft, scrambled aboard and flew back to Germany. When I got out, when he landed, I scrambled out very quickly, but my sergeant spotted me. I ran back to the bivouac because I was on 12 hours stand down. As I said, I was okay. And he said to